Hello everyone, this is Lahiro again, bringing you the part 3 of UiPath Data Service video series. So, in the part 2, we looked at how to insert data into a data entity we create in data service. So, in the part 3, we'll be looking at how we can query and update the data in the entities we created. So, I have a simple scenario. So this is one of my entities as we did in the previous videos. So in this entity I would like to query for the students who are doing swimming. So basically we have two students who has activities as swimming. So I'll be needing to get the student names and the age of the guys who are doing swimming as one requirement, and as a second requirement I'll be also needing to update the cost of the students who do swimming and the cost. So if a student is doing swimming for less than 35, uh, I need to update that particular record as the cost as 50. So those are the two requirements. So let's see how we can go about it and build a workflow. So as the first step, we need to query the data from the entity. So I need to get the student activities and also the student details. So we'll be using the query entity records. So in this one, you need to select which entity that you are going to query. So we have a relationship. I need to find the student information of the students who do swimming. So I need to look for the activities, and also I need to look for the data in the students entity. So if you actually select students here and go to query editor, and if you expand this drop down, you will see only the fields in the students entity, and I don't have access to student activities. So what I can do is I will click cancel and I will go for the student activities and get back to the query editor. Now if you expand this, I can see the fields that I have in the activities entity, which is the cost per month, registered date, and activity name, and so on. And also I can see the fields available in the student entity through the student ID, because student ID is the relationship field that we used, and here we can get access to their first name, last name, and the age. So through this we can get the data we need from both entities. So I'll be using the student activities entity to get the required data. So as the first query, I need to look for the students who do swimming as their activity. So how to do that is I will look for the activity name and I will say equal, and I can type swimming here. This query will give you all the records that has swimming under the activity name field. Also, if you need to build a query with multiple commands or with multiple group of commands, you can use add row. Means it's another command along with this option. If you go for add group, it will be a group of conditions that you can build inside the group. So for now I'll be using only one condition, so you can explore how to use the multiple conditions. So I'll leave that part for you guys. So if once you provide this as swimming and I click OK, then I will need to set the output of this query. So I'll press Ctrl K and I would say student activities. So if you check the variables panel, this is an I list of student activities type. Okay, now the next step is I need to loop through this list to access the data in the student activities type list. So basically it will return all the information of the students who are doing swimming and the activity related details and also the student details. So let's see how we can access them. So I'll be using a for each, and I'll be specifying student activities, and this for each loop has to be of type student activities. So I can select that from the drop down here. Now once I get the records, I need to get the student ID, first name, last name, and the age into a data table so that I can write it into an Excel. So let's create a data table first with the fields that we need. Build data table. So basically this table will have the same data types as we have in the student's entity. So I need the student ID, first name, last name, and age. So I'll be using string for all four. So I'll remove this, and I would say student ID, first name, last name, and finally the age. So I have the data table now. I would say dt swimming students. Right. Now inside the loop, I need to use the add data row activity to add the data into the students data table. So I'll be using add row feature over here. So now how can I access the data in the uh, how can I access the data in the student activities item? So this is how you can access the data in the students entity through the students activities entity. So all you need to do is you can specify item dot, and it will give you all the available fields in the student activities entity. So you won't see anything as you saw earlier in the query editor as student ID dot first name, last name, and so on. All you see is the fields we have in the student activities. How you can access the students fields is by using the field that we use to build the relationship. So if you use the student ID, you can see that it's of type students. So I would say item.student ID, and then I would specify the fields I need from the students entity. So here we can access all those fields. So I would say student ID is the ID field. Okay, so for the array row I need the brackets. The next field is again student ID dot first name, item, last name, and finally the edge. So that's it. That is how you access the data in the related entity. So once you do that, click OK, and you need to provide the data table. Now since you have configured that, we'll use a simple right frame so that we can see how the data looks like. So I'll just specify the Excel file name, and sheet 1 looks good, and BT swimming students. Okay, so this is the first requirement that I had. So let's run this and see what we can get in the Excel sheet. So as of now, I have not created the Excel sheet, as you can see here. So let me run this. So it will query the entities and get the data into the Excel file. So, and if I refresh, I can see the output Excel, and we have the data of the 2 students who are doing swimming. So basically, if you can get back to data services, uh, so I need to get to the other entity, the data. Here you can see STE001 and STE002 are the guys who are doing swimming, and these are the details of those 2 guys from the students entity. So you don't see the header because I didn't enable add headers, so I will do that now. So now the second requirement, how can I update the data? So I need to update the cost of the guys who are doing swimming, and if the cost is less than 35, I need to update it as 50. So let's see how we can do that now. So since we have queried the data from the students activities, we can use another for each loop. So I'll leave this part as it is and use another for each to loop through the data in the list, and again it will be student activities and of type student activities. So in this I'll be looping through the data, and I need to check whether the cost is less than 35. So for that I'll be needing a if condition. In the if condition, if you specify item dot cost per month, so since now we are accessing the data of the student activities, I don't need to use the related column to access that field, so it will be in the same entity. So I'll say cost per month, and if you can see the data type is of as decimal, and we have a question mark at the end, so it's not decimal that we use normally, so we need to convert that to the decimal format. So what I should do is, yeah, so before that let me show you this. So if I do like this and say less than 35, this will actually give you an error saying that you cannot convert those two. So what I need to do is I need to convert this into the decimal format. So I would say decimal dot cost and toString. So this will convert the value you get from this cost per month field into a decimal, and you can compare that with the value that we are looking for. So if it is less than 35, then I need to update the cost as 50. So this is where we need to specify which row that we should update. So for example, you might have multiple rows that fit into that condition. So how does it know that this is the row that it should update? So that's a part where it identifies the row using the ID field, using this unique ID. So whenever we are specifying an update, we need to specify the ID of the row that we need to update. So let's see how we can do that. So first of all, we need to have a variable of type student activities. So to do that easily, you can use the entities in the project panel and drag it over here, and it will create a variable for you. So I will specify updated student activities, and I need to initialize that. So I'll be using a multiple assign again. So the first thing is to initialize that. So I'll be saying updated student activities variable of type new student activities. So this will initialize that. And next we need to provide the field ID. So which field are we going to update? Because through this query we did over here, this returns all the data related to that condition we have specified here, and it will have all the fields including the ID field and all the related entities fields as well. So we can easily use the properties of that to identify which row we are looking at, because we are looping through each item in the list one at a time. So I'll be specifying updated student activities. I need to find the ID. So if you type ID, it will be available ID. And if I say item, which is the looping variable over here, item dot ID is the row that we need to update, because we are iterating through a list. So once we have specified that, we also need to specify all the other fields, because if we only specify the field that we are going to update, it means that these fields will be empty, and if those are marked as required, it will throw you an error. So every time when you are doing an update, we need to provide the values for all the fields. So how you are going to get those values? We already have that in the variable which we created through the query option. So we can use the same set of fields. So I will say updated activities, and I need to specify the student ID, which is of type students. So this is the related relationship field. So how do you specify that? So we'll just create the field over here, and if you can remember how we got the data from the students entity through the student activities is by the student ID. That's how we specified in this add data row. So, so this is of type student. So that's the relationship field. So similarly, we can specify that here. We can say item dot student ID of this type students, and that will pick it up. And then we have the other columns, activity name. Again, we have that in the item activity name, and the registration date, item the registration date, and finally the field that we really need to update, cost per month. So for this one, it expects a decimal. So I'll be specifying 50 because that's the value I need to update. So basically over here we have one row that needs to be updated. So this should get updated through our workflow. So I have configured the fields now. Now, now what I need to do is I need to use the another activity to update. So I'll be using update entity record. So I'll be dragging it over here, right below the multiple assign, and I need to specify which entity I'm going to update. So it's going to be student activities, and the input record is going to be this variable we created, and the output of that I assign it to the same variable. Okay, so by running this workflow, we should be able to update our data in the entity. So let's give it a run. So you can see that it's running and it has completed, and we didn't come across any errors. So let's see how our output looks like. So if we get to the student activities and do a refresh, we can see that this record has been updated as 50 for swimming. So that's how you do the update. And if we uh, check the output Excel file, you can also see the students who do swimming now with the column IDs because I enabled that. So that's how you do the update entities through the workflows. So we have two other activities over here. So how are we to delete or to get a record by ID? So as you know, as of now, as we covered several steps over here, so if you have to do a delete, if you have to drag it to the same workflow, you just need to specify which entity is going to be affected, and it asks for ID. So you already know that what this ID means. It is the field that represent or has the unique reference for each row. So every time when you are deleting, you need to specify that. Same thing happens for the update. Even though the activity doesn't say that it's being updated by the ID, we need to provide that, and that's how it's going to identify the row. Uh, so when it comes to deleting, it's the same concept. You just need to first query the entity as we did in our workflow and find the ID and provide that here so that it will delete that specific record. And when it comes to the get entity record by ID, this again uses the same ID field to get the data by specifying a specific ID. So again, to get that ID, you just need to query again, or you should have that information available within your workflow so that you can pass that to this field and get the output. The output will be of this activity. The output will be of type. If you specify student activities, the output will create a new variable of student activities type. If you select something else, it will be of that particular time. So that's how you can use all these activities related to data services which are available as of now. And I hope my videos helped you to get an understanding on how to use the data service, how to create entities, and how you can build workflows to insert, update, query, and also delete records that are in these entities that we created. So thank you for listening, and this is the last video of the data service series that I came across with. So if you are seeing this video for the first time, please refer to the part 1, 2, and also the interactive sign-in videos that I created, and follow that path, and it will be easy for you to understand. And again, thank you for listening, and have a nice day.